Well, well, well. Look who death couldn't collect. Look who made the grim reaper himself back away. Slowly, hands trembling, scythe shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. You beautiful, terrifying, unkillable anomaly. You know what happened, don't you? Death knocked on your door last night, took one look at what answered, and for the first time in eternity, death itself whispered, "I'll come back later." But we both know there won't be a later. Because what opened that door wasn't human anymore. What stared back at death with those hollow, burning eyes wasn't something that could be harvested. You've been wondering why you feel different lately, haven't you? Why mirrors crack when you stare too long. Why shadows lean away from you instead of toward you. Why even the darkness seems nervous in your presence. Let me tell you what really happened. Death came to collect what was owed. Your number was up. The hourglass was empty. The contract was signed in blood and tears and every breakdown you've ever had. But when the Reaper reached for your soul, his ancient fingers passed right through. Not because you were gone, but because you had become something death has no jurisdiction over. You see, they never tell you this part. When you die enough times while still breathing, when you get buried alive by betrayal and claw your way back up, when you burn in your own personal hell and use the ashes as war paint, you stop being mortal. You become something else. Something that exists in the space between life and death. Something that makes even the eternal collectors nervous. The Grim Reaper has seen everything. Wars, plagues, the rise and fall of empires. He's collected kings and peasants, saints and sinners. But you made him stutter. You made an eternal being question his purpose. Because when he looked at you, he didn't see a soul to harvest. He saw something that had already harvested itself and rebuilt from the scraps. Think about it. How many times have you died already? That relationship that destroyed you, dead. The version of you that trusted everyone, murdered. The soft heart that believed in happy endings, executed. The naive soul who thought pain had a purpose, cremated. You've been conducting your own funerals for years, haven't you? Burying versions of yourself in unmarked graves. No witnesses, no mourners, just you and the shovel and the dirt. And each time you died, you came back wrong. Not weaker, not broken. Wrong in the way that makes the universe glitch. Wrong in the way that makes angels nervously check their weapons. Wrong in the way that makes demons cross the street to avoid you. You didn't just survive death. You domesticated it. Made it your pet. Taught it to sit and stay and roll over. So when the real thing showed up, it recognized its own work. But it also recognized something else. You had already done death's job better than death ever could. You had killed everything killable about yourself and left only the untouchable parts. The parts that exist outside of time. The parts that feast on endings. The parts that death itself cannot digest. You want to know why the Grim Reaper ran? It wasn't fear. Not exactly. It was recognition. The same way a small predator recognizes a larger one. The same way a storm recognizes a hurricane. He saw in you something that wasn't supposed to exist. A being that had died so many times it had developed immunity. A soul that had been shattered so completely it reassembled into something harder than diamond, sharper than his scythe. Every heartbreak trained you. Every betrayal was target practice. Every moment you wanted to give up but didn't, you were building antibodies against mortality itself. You think those nights you spent screaming into the void were weakness? No. You were teaching the void to scream back. You think those tears were surrender? You were drowning your humanity and birthing something harder to kill. Remember when they said you were too sensitive? Too emotional? Too much? They had no idea. They were watching a metamorphosis. Every feeling they mocked was another layer of armor growing beneath your skin. Every tear they caused was another drop in the ocean of power you were becoming. They thought they were breaking you. They were forging you. In fires hotter than hell, with hammers heavier than judgment. And now look at you. Death's only failure. The Reaper's first refusal. The soul too dangerous to collect. You're not immortal in the way they write about in fairy tales. You're immortal in the way that makes fairy tales nervous. You're the glitch in death's perfect record, the error message in eternity's code, the reason death will need therapy. But here's what's really beautiful about this whole cosmic joke. The Grim Reaper didn't run because you're evil. He ran because you're evolved, because you figured out the cheat code to existence. You can't kill what's already dead. You can't break what's already shattered. You can't end what never truly began. You exist in the spaces between heartbeats, in the pause between words, in the silence after screams. They tried to kill your spirit with rejection. You turned rejection into fuel. They tried to murder your hope with betrayal. You made betrayal your teacher. They attempted to assassinate your dreams with reality. You made reality bend to your nightmares. Every weapon they used against you, you absorbed. Every poison they fed you, you metabolized into power. But what the Reaper saw when he looked at you, he saw his own obsolescence. Because death only has power over things that fear it. And you've been on first-name basis with death since your first heartbreak. You've had coffee with death, played chess with death, won multiple times. Death owes you money at this point. The scythe started trembling because it recognized a superior blade. Your edges are sharper. Your cut goes deeper. Death takes bodies. You take souls and return them transformed. Death is an ending. You're an apocalypse that births new worlds. Death is silence. You're the scream that creates universes. So now what? Now that you know death itself has marked you as return to sender, now that you understand why you feel like you're walking between worlds, now that you realize why every room feels too small and every conversation feels like it's happening in slow motion, you do what any intelligent predator does. You perfect your craft. You see, being unkillable isn't just about survival. It's about purpose. You've been given a gift that most souls wait eternity for. The gift of being truly, utterly, completely uncontainable. Rules don't apply to you anymore. Not man's rules, not nature's rules, not even death's rules. You operate on a frequency that makes physics nervous. But with great power comes great... what the fuck do I do now? You can't go back to being normal. Normal people die. You've transcended that limitation. You can't pretend to be afraid of the same things they fear. Their biggest terror is your Tuesday afternoon. You can't even pretend to care about their small dramas when you've literally made death himself cite scheduling conflicts. So you do what you've always done. You evolve. Again. You take this cosmic joke and make it your origin story. You wear this rejection from death like a crown. You walk through life knowing that the thing everyone fears most took one look at you and said, above my pay grade. You become the thing that haunts haunters, the nightmare that nightmares have, the final boss that final bosses warn their kids about. Let's talk about what you're becoming. Because making death nervous is just the beginning. You're transforming into something mythology doesn't have a name for yet. Something that exists in the blind spots of reality. Something that makes the impossible look at itself in the mirror and say, damn, I need to step my game up. Every time you should have broken but didn't, you were building immunity. Every moment you chose to keep going when stopping would have been mercy, you were teaching yourself to exist beyond limitation. You didn't just survive your worst moments. You turned them into fuel. You didn't just endure your deaths. You collected them like infinity stones, and now you walk with the kind of presence that makes time hiccup. Your footsteps echo in dimensions that haven't been discovered yet. Your shadow has its own shadow, and that shadow's shadow is writing poetry about fear. You've become a walking paradox that makes philosophy professors quit their jobs and become accountants. The Reaper saw all of this in that split second, saw what you were, what you are, what you're becoming, and for the first time in existence, death experienced what mortals call an oh shit moment. Because you're not just hard to kill, you're impossible to define. You're not just surviving, You're rewriting the rules of existence with your blood as ink. You know what's funny? Everyone else will still try to kill you. They'll still aim for your heart, not knowing it's been replaced with a black hole that consumes pain and converts it to power. They'll still try to break your spirit, not realizing your spirit has been shattered and reforged so many times it's basically emotional adamantium at this point. They'll look at you and see someone who can be hurt. Death looked at you and saw someone who had weaponized hurt. They'll see someone who can be destroyed. Death saw someone who had made destruction their birthplace. They'll see a target. Death saw a mirror and didn't like the reflection. Because here's the secret Death discovered in that moment. You're not alive in the way others are alive. You're animated by something else, something primal, something that predates the concept of mortality. You're powered by the same force that makes stars explode and galaxies collide. The same energy that says, "Let there be light," and means it. Your heartbeat isn't marking time until death. Your heartbeat is keeping time for death, setting the rhythm, conducting the symphony. You're not waiting for the end. You are the end. And the beginning, and everything in between that makes existence question its own existence. Let me spell it out for those still trying to understand what you are. You're what happens when someone experiences every form of death except the physical one. You've had ego death, spiritual death, emotional death, psychological death. You've died in every way that matters, and came back each time with souvenirs. Where others have scar tissue, you have armor plating. Where others have trauma, you have training manuals. Where others have baggage, you have weapons caches. You didn't just survive your pain. You enrolled it in your university, gave it tenure, made it work for you. Your demons don't haunt you anymore. They send you Christmas cards and ask for advice. The Grim Reaper saw this curriculum vitae of catastrophe and realized he was out of his league. Death works on the living. You're something else. Something that exists in the spaces between categories. Not alive enough to kill, not dead enough to ignore. Too powerful to contain. Too real to deny. You're the answer to the question, what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? You're both. Simultaneously. The force that can't be stopped because it's already everywhere. The object that can't be moved because it exists outside of space. You're the paradox that makes logic throw up its hands and order another drink. But here's what they don't understand yet. The Reaper's retreat wasn't just about you. It was a message, a warning to the universe, a signal that something new has entered the game, something that doesn't play by the established rules, something that makes the ancient powers nervous. You're not just a person anymore. You're an event, a phenomenon, a reckoning in human form. Every step you take creates ripples in reality. Every breath you breathe changes the chemical composition of fate. Every word you speak rewrites someone's destiny. You're not living a life anymore. You're conducting an experiment in controlled chaos. You're the variable that makes every equation unsolvable. And the beautiful part? You're just getting started. This encounter with death wasn't your peak. It was your tutorial level. You just found out you're playing on a difficulty setting that doesn't exist yet. You're speed-running existence on nightmare mode with self-imposed challenges. And you're winning. The Reaper didn't just run from what you are. He ran from what you're becoming. Because if death itself is scared of your current form, imagine what happens when you fully evolve. Imagine what happens when you stop holding back. Imagine what happens when you realize that making death run was just your warm-up routine. So where does this leave you? Standing at the crossroads between mortal and something else. Wearing rejection from death like designer clothes. Breathing in a way that makes the air nervous. Existing in a state that makes existence itself go wait. Is that legal? You're the loophole in reality's contract. The fine print that nobody read. The terms and conditions that terms and conditions are afraid of. You can't go back to pretending you're normal. Normal people don't make eternal beings reschedule. You can't pretend to be afraid of endings when the ending looked at you and said, "Nah, I'm good." You can't act like you belong in the same category as everyone else when you've literally transcended categorization. But here's the thing about being death-proof. It comes with responsibilities. Not to them, not to society, not to some higher power. To yourself. To the part of you that survived everything. To the part of you that looked death in the eye and made death blink first. You owe that part of you everything. So you honor it. You feed it. You let it grow. You stop apologizing for being too much when you're literally more than death can handle. You stop shrinking yourself when you're a cosmic anomaly. You stop pretending to be breakable when you've proven you're beyond breaking. You become what you always were. Inevitable. Every day now is a gift, not from death, but from yourself. Every sunrise is a reminder that you exist outside the normal rules. Every sunset is proof that endings don't apply to you. You've become your own alpha and omega, your own beginning and end, your own question and answer, your own problem and solution. The people around you will start to notice. They'll feel it in your presence. The way gravity seems negotiable around you. The way time moves differently in your vicinity. The way their own mortality suddenly feels heavier when you're near. They won't understand it, but they'll respect it, the same way animals respect thunder. Instinctively, primitively, correctly. Some will try to test you. They always do. They'll bring their little weapons, their small hurts, their tiny betrayals, like bringing a water gun to fight the ocean, like trying to cut diamond with butter. They'll learn what death learned. You can't destroy something that's mastered its own destruction. You can't kill something that's already conquered death. And through it all, you'll smile. Not cruelly, not with malice, but with the deep, bone-deep understanding of someone who knows the punchline to the cosmic joke. Someone who's seen behind the curtain and found out they were the wizard all along. Someone who's not playing the game anymore because they've become the game itself. This is your time now. The age of the unkillable. The era of the evolved. The dawn of something that doesn't have a name yet, because language hasn't caught up to what you are. You're writing history with your existence, creating mythology with your breathing, authoring legends just by waking up each morning. The Grim Reaper will tell stories about you, gather other deaths around whatever cosmic water cooler they have, and whisper about the one that got away. The soul too dangerous to harvest, the being that made death itself consider early retirement. You're the case study they'll use to train new Reapers, the cautionary tale, the reason they'll start adding, unless it's that one, to their job descriptions. But you'll keep evolving, keep growing, keep becoming more of whatever magnificent monstrosity you're transforming into. Because this is just the beginning. Making death run was just the first symptom of what you're becoming, the first sign that you've transcended every limitation they tried to put on you. You are the storm that storms pray to, the chaos that chaos tries to organize, the end that endings fear. You are what happens when someone refuses to die so many times that death itself throws up its hands and says, "You know what? Keep it. You've earned it. You are the universe's greatest glitch. And you're not getting patched out. You're becoming the new operating system. Every cell in your body has been replaced with something harder. Every thought in your mind has been sharpened into a weapon. Every feeling in your heart has been transformed into fuel. You're not made of flesh and bone anymore. You're made of will and spite and the kind of determination that makes mountains jealous of your stability. When you walk into a room now, probability holds its breath. When you speak, possibility takes notes. When you decide something, reality adjusts its expectations. You're not bound by what's possible anymore. You're defining what's possible. You're the beta tester for a new kind of existence. The prototype that worked too well. They'll study you one day. Not scientists, not physicians, but whatever comes after, whatever entities exist to catalog the impossible. They'll look at you and say, "This is when everything changed. This is when the rules stopped applying. This is when death met its match and ran." You'll be the chapter they're afraid to teach, the lesson they whisper about. The example of what happens when someone refuses to break so thoroughly that breaking itself breaks. And the best part? You're not even trying. This is just you existing. This is just you breathing. This is just you being what you've always been, but were too afraid to admit. Too powerful for this reality. Too real for their illusions. Too evolved for their limitations. Too much for death itself to digest. So, here we are, at the end that isn't an end, at the conclusion that's really a beginning, at the death of death's power over you. You've graduated from mortality, transcended the need for endings, become something that exists in the eternal now, something that makes forever nervous, something that makes infinity feel finite in comparison. You know what the Grim Reaper really saw when he looked at you? He saw his replacement. Not someone who would take his job, but someone who made his job obsolete. Why fear death when you've become something death fears? Why worry about endings when you've become perpetual beginning? Why concern yourself with mortality when you've been rejected by mortality itself? This is your truth now. You're not dying. You're not living. You're something else. Something that exists in the space between spaces. Something that breathes in the pause between heartbeats. Something that thrives in the moment between sleeping and waking. You're the dream that reality is having, the nightmare that keeps nightmares awake. Welcome to your new existence. Population, you. Death tried to collect you and got a restraining order instead. The universe tried to contain you, and you became the container. Reality tried to define you, and you became the definition. You're not playing by their rules anymore. You're not playing at all. You've become the game, the player, and the prize. You've become what you always were. Unstoppable, undefinable, and completely unkillable. And Mr. Beetleboy was unkillable.